A fairly pervasive violation of the end-to-end argument are home gateways, which often perform something called network address translation. Now, in a home network, we have many devices that connect to the network, but when we buy service from our internet service provider, we're typically only given one public IP address. And yet, we have a whole variety of devices that we may want to connect. Now, the idea behind network address translation is that we can give each of these devices a private IP address. Now, there are designated regions of the IP address space that are for private IP addresses. One of those is 192.168.0.0/16. And there are others which you can go read about in RFC 3130. Now, each one of these devices in the home gets its own private IP address. The public internet, on the other hand, sees a public IP address, which typically is the IP address provided by the internet service provider. When packets traverse the home router, which is often running a network address translation process, the source address of every packet is rewritten to the public IP address. Now, when traffic comes back to that public IP address, the network address translator needs to know which device behind the NAT the traffic should be sent to. So it uses a mapping of port numbers to identify which device the return traffic should be sent to in the home network. So the NAT, or the network address translator, maintains a table that says packets with the source IP address of 192.168.1.51 and source port 1000 should be rewritten to a source address of the public IP address and a source port of 50878. Similarly, packets with a source IP address of 192.168.1.52 and source port of 1000 should be rewritten to the public IP address and a source port of 50879. Then when traffic returns to the NAT to one of these addresses, the NAT knows that it needs to rewrite the destination address on the return traffic to the appropriate destination IP address and port that's in the private network. So for outbound traffic, the NAT device creates a table entry mapping the computer's local IP address and port number to the public IP address and a different port number, and replaces the sending computer's non-routable IP address with the gateway or the NAT public IP address. It also replaces the sender's source port with a different source port that allows it to demultiplex the packets sent to this return address and port. For inbound traffic to the home network, the NAT checks the destination port on the packet, and based on the port, it rewrites the destination IP address and port to the private IP address in the table before forwarding the traffic to a local device in the home network.